Good evening. This is the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission meeting for February 7th, 2022. I hereby call this meeting to order. I'm the chair, Ross Bruck. Also in attendance this evening are other Planning Commission members, Tony Bush, TJ Gill, and Adrian Costello. The fifth member, Dawn Stern, is not in attendance this evening. Our first item of order this evening is approval of the January 10th, 2022 meeting minutes. Do we have any questions, concerns, or changes to those minutes? And if not, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll do a motion to approve.
Adrian, do you want to second that?
Yeah, I second.
I think we lost Tony.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, yes.
Well, there's only three of us in here. We're like 20 feet apart from each other, so I'll take the mask off.
Very good. So motion to approve. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Tony, you missed a chance to approve or contest those minutes. They were approved. So do we have you back? Can you hear Tony? Not quite.
Something about Tony.
Tony, can you hear us?
Tony, can you hear? No.
No.
He looks like he's stuck. Oh, there.
He does look like he is stuck. Give him one more minute to deal with technical difficulties before we move on to the next agenda item. He can always call in if he needs to.
And I'm not sure if you can hear me, Tony, but sometimes it's good just to log out and log in again.
We did lose him for a minute. Tony, can you hear us now?
Now I
There
can
you
hear you. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so we did approve the minutes from January. So now we can move on to the third item, which is the Act 537 Plan Special Study, Sale of the Sewer System. This is a revisit of an item that we addressed during the last meeting, and we have a guest with us this evening. Fred, would you care to identify yourself for the commission?
Yes, my name is Fred Ebert. I am the Lower Makefield Township wastewater consultant. And when I'm here, and I apologize for not being able to attend the last meeting, I unfortunately had a conflict that I couldn't get resolved. But really what I'm here to is explain what this special study is and what the input is needed from the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission, as well as the impact on that and what the long-term Act 537 planning responsibilities that will remain with Lower Makefield Township. So the Act 537 plan, by its definition, is the means in which Lower Makefield Township identifies the methods for providing sanitary sewer, wastewater treatment and disposal. That's both a combination of public sewer as well as our on-lot sewer areas. Anytime that there is a change to the 537, to the means of the public sewer service or the on-lot sewer service, DEP requires that it be reviewed by the county planning agency, township planning agency, county health department, so that the township can take all of those comments under consideration in making their decision to approve a revision to that. In this situation, the revision is an institutional one as to who will own and operate and maintain the public sanitary sewer system. Lower Makefield Township is in the process of finalizing the sale of the public sewer system to Aqua, Pennsylvania. So what the DEP wants to make sure that this planning commission looked at and evaluated and made a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors is how will it impact their ability to implement the SALDO, subdivision land development ordinance, zoning ordinance, and any master planning documents. The most important thing is that the 537 plan controls the public sewer service area, the means in which it's done. That is not impacted at all by this sale. That still remains the responsibility of the township. And in order for the township to make their decision, DEP requires input from the Township Planning Commission, this body, Bucks County Planning Commission, and the Bucks County Health Department, which they'll make a decision to modify public sewer service areas, increase them, decrease them, any planning modules that go through, on that. So all this special study does is it changes the ownership and operation of the sewer system from the sewer authority working with Lower Makefield Township owning the system to Aqua Pennsylvania. So Aqua Pennsylvania will now be required to implement all the requirements of the 537 plan. So whatever the Board of Supervisors says has to be done, Aqua Pennsylvania can't do anything without planning approval. The same way DEP is asking for acknowledgement of that. So really what you're looking at from this board is an acknowledgement that because 537 planning stays with the township, that it will not, that the change of who actually operates the system will not change your ability to implement your saldo or zoning. So, and I understand that last month you may have not fully understood that that was your purview. The purview is to give guidance to the supervisors that say, hey, so long as we still control the 537 plan and you're not changing the public sewer service area, you're not changing anything besides who actually operates the system. And the operation, it's not only operation and maintenance, but it's billing and setting billing. It is that, but that does not, in my opinion, that does not impact the saldo or zoning. What impacts the saldo and zoning is the area of the public sewer service area. That's not changing. All the requirements of the existing 537 plan, which includes a corrective action plan, a connection management plan, all those requirements remain the same. Just the implementation now goes from the Board of Supervisors to Aqua Pennsylvania. So what I'm looking for, or would like to answer any questions from the board, but what I would like is a recommendation from this board to the Board of Supervisors to adopt the Act 537 plan for the reasons that the public sewer service area is not changing, and your ability to implement and make recommendations on the zoning and subdivision and land development are not impaired in any way, that you can do your same job today as you can with Aqua owning it because you control the 537 plan, or the township does. So it sends a bad, not a non-positive statement to DEP that we take a non-action. That means either you didn't understand what was in, which is why I'm here, or you don't agree with that, and you believe that it somehow would impact your ability to make proper recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on all planning aspects within Lower Makefield Township. So what I would like to do is offer up and answer any questions of the board, and then ask for their reconsideration to make a recommendation after any discussion to approve this 537 plan, as you will with all future 537 plan amendments or anything that would modify the Township's Act 537 plan, which includes planning modules. So with that said, I would open up to the board for any questions that you have of me. And then I would ask for your reconsideration of a new motion to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors with any comments that you deem appropriate for them to consider that in their review and approval of the 537 plan. But this is a requirement. This is not a voluntary thing. This is a requirement of DEP. DEP says you must adopt a special study so that we formally modify our 537 plan so that would allow Aqua Pennsylvania to take over ownership and operation of the public sewer system within Lower Makefield Township.
So I'll begin with a couple of questions. My first question is, you identified 3 areas of review, 1 with regards to the saldo, 2 with regards to the comprehensive plan, 3 with regards to zoning. Why doesn't zoning, the question about zoning and the approval, fall under the zoning hearing board instead of the planning commission?
It probably would have, and that was probably a poor word choice on mine, but it would be in that you guys look at zoning and you determine that this use is acceptable within that zoning district. And that implies public sewer. So that's why I said that you would say, as you review a proposed development, trail, anything, that you would say in its accordance with zoning, therefore doesn't have to go to the zoning hearing board. So zoning may not be the most appropriate. And Jim, I'll leave you correct me.
This would not go to the zoning hearing board. The zoning hearing board is charged with hearing appeals from zoning ordinance regulations from homeowners and property owners within the township. The planning commission does have oversight on zoning regulations, such as when they did the zoning overlay for the Prickett Reserve project. And also when other zoning amendments are promoted or put in front of the planning commission oversees that. So that's sort of your role in the zoning process. You do have a role in the zoning process. The zoning hearing board does not. They only have a role in hearing appeals from determinations of applicability of the zoning ordinance.
Thank you. And one other question with regards to clarification. In an email earlier today, you responded to, or you wrote to the planning commission that it is our responsibility, the responsibility of the Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission to verify the sale of the sewer system will not impact, I assume, the township's ability to enforce the saldo and the zoning of the township. I understand that. Based on what you just said, it sounds like we're specifically charged with approving or not the special study. And I just want clarification. Are we able to approve what we can with regards to the sale of the system under our purview, or are you specifically looking for an approval of the special study?
No, only what's under your purview. The same way that I asked the health department, only what's under their purview, county planning commission, only what's under their purview. So it's only what's under your purview. And actually, it really has nothing to do with the rest of it. It's really how it impacts you and your ability to make recommendations under the saldo and just your purview.
Thank you. That was helpful. I may have some follow-up questions, but I'll open it up to my fellow board members first.
Okay, if I can.
Tony, go ahead.
Just a couple of item questions and then also some just points of clarification. You mentioned that it was a requirement that there be input from the planning commission, and I'd submit that we already gave our input. I understand you're here for reconsideration of that input, but as far as we were concerned at our last meeting, we were done with this and we had moved on. So I think we've already addressed that. I understand it's reconsideration at this point. I guess another issue which we really have not looked at as a planning commission is how it could impact the master plan. You have indicated, I think, tonight and in the email that Ross referred to, I think it was in that as well, that it could impact the master plan. And as a board, we haven't begun to discuss that at all. Tonight, you also mentioned something which I'd just like you to clarify, because I'm not sure that I heard you correctly, or maybe I misunderstood you. You indicated that the township would still be responsible for, I guess, development of maintenance plans, and Aqua would be responsible for implementation. Did I hear that correctly? Or as Aqua, as the new owner, would not have more say than that as in terms of maintenance?
You did not hear that correctly, or I did not state that correctly. That the 537 plan, meaning where we provide public sewers and how we provide that, remains with the township. The implementation and methodology of how it's operated and maintained is transferred to Aqua, Pennsylvania. So they have to implement the Township's Act 537 plan. How they do that is on compliance with the regulations of the PADEP and any contracts that are transferred with it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Now, as Ross was asking about earlier, we had not really looked at this, nor was it presented to us previously to look at whether or not this was necessarily in compliance with the township's zoning ordinances. Obviously, I think we'd have to defer to Barbara as the solicitor for the Planning Commission to help us out with that. And I guess for the moment, that's what I've got. Thank you.
And I'll leave Barb also respond to that, but that the change of ownership has no impact on the public sewer service areas, and your ability or where sewers are provided is really what it is. And that's why it doesn't impact you. In my opinion, from a planning commission, you are within the public sewer service area and how it's done, that the means and methods of how it's maintained doesn't necessarily have a direct impact, whether it's done by the Lower Makefield Township or Aqua, Pennsylvania, wouldn't impact your review and analysis of approving any proposed project, whether it be development or township project. But I'll also leave Barb expand on that as well.
So Fred's correct in that as far as the comprehensive plan is concerned, Township had maintained and operated a sanitary sewer system in order to provide public sewer service to its residents. While there's still some properties that have private septic tanks, overall, any new development must connect into public sewer system if available. So the comprehensive plan is geared in order to provide public sewer system services to all the residents in the township. That's going to stay in place, although there's a sale, as Fred said, of ownership of the system. If you look at the comprehensive plan and the anticipation of all residents having public sewer service, that's the long-term wastewater disposal system that the comprehensive plan addresses. That is going to continue to be what the township seeks. So that's how your review of this Act 537 study would be in consideration of the overall master comprehensive plan. Does that answer your question, Tony?
I guess so. I'm trying to figure out what's changed between last meeting and this meeting for us.
So I'll tell you what changed. What happened was last meeting was anticipation that this would be in front of the Board of Supervisors on their meeting after the January Planning Commission meeting. However, after reviewing the minutes and seeing some sort of confusion as to why the study was even presented to the board, and the fact that Fred was not available to participate in that meeting to provide a more clear explanation of why Planning Commission needed to review it, Township Administration asked that if Fred would be available for this meeting in order to give the Planning Commission more specific information as why the study came to you for review. And that's why it's back in front of you in anticipation that if you heard of the better explanation as to why you were reviewing this study, you may reconsider the position you took at the last meeting of taking no action, but might make a recommendation to approve the study.
Thank you. I guess the one last point, when we met last, we were sort of, I felt we were under a little bit of pressure to make a decision that meeting because that there was an upcoming Board of Supervisors meeting where this was going to be addressed. And this evening, 5 minutes before we got on the call or on the Zoom meeting, I happened to see that on the township website that this was put out for public comment on January 21st for 30 days. So at least till February 21st. So when we met last meeting, we may have been under a misconception that we had to take action at all last meeting because
and part of that was my misunderstanding of the necessity for your immediate review. I was under the misunderstanding that this had to be before the Board of Supervisors immediately. It wasn't until after the meeting that there was a decision to put this on the website for public comment and review, and to defer the supervisor's final review of the special study. And again, Fred was giving me some information, but I guess when you're trying to relay the information, some of it doesn't always come across as clearly as him being in front of you or sending out the email like he did. And administration thought it would be best that rather than the planning commission be under a misconception as to why you were even looking at this to start out with, they wanted Fred to come back and clarify for you why the review had to be conducted. So we should have done it this way the first time around, but Fred wasn't available.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and Tony, one of the other things, just so you're aware, it related to that public notice, the DEP is requiring a public hearing now at the township on February 21st. A special public hearing meeting was scheduled by the board at its last meeting. It was, discussed, I think, by supervisors on January 14th. And I unfortunately told them on January 14th I couldn't attend, but they're scheduling it anyway, so moving ahead. So I won't be able to provide my own public comment there at the public hearing. But a big part of this is to, as Mr. Ebert said in what he was in his intro there, is essentially, I'm very much simplifying this. I recognize that, but it's basically, it helps with pushing the sale through at the DEP level to check the box that the Planning Commission has approved of it, so it doesn't look like there's any negative connotation from the Planning Commission's purview with respect to the Act 537 plan and the sale of the sewer system. So that's why the township administration is so adamant about having the Planning Commission provide comment or making some sort of vote tonight other than no action, because it helps the sale of the system in terms of DEP review, in terms making it look, dare I say, more positive in the eyes of DEP without trying to push in either direction.
Well, I also think it's relevant that the Planning Commission understand they weren't looking at the study as to whether or not the sale should go through. They were actually looking at the study as to how it affects the comprehensive plan, our saldo, and zoning regulations. And for them to now learn that the township still maintains control over the long-term plan for wastewater disposal, I think is a significant difference in their original understanding of why this study was sent in front of them.
I 100% agree with you, Ms. Kirk, in that the only thing, and I said this last time, the 537 plan is very much a technical document that lays out future plans for sewer treatment within the township. It is not an opinion document by any means. And there are a couple items in here that I do feel are not appropriate for a 537 plan as a technical document, as there is significant debate about the reasoning behind certain things. And I would have said this at the February 21st public hearing meeting if it had been scheduled at a date when I could attend. But under Section 7, third paragraph, and this is what I mentioned at the last meeting, it mentions several reasons for selling the system. I think if you spoke to 5 different people, you might get 5 different answers, some of whom might agree with this, some of whom would vehemently disagree with this based on public presentations made by township administration and future plans and for rate increases and the state of the system. So I have no issue with a 537 plan personally moving forward as a technical document. My only issue is that there are reasons given for the sale of the system that I believe to be very much debatable, and many of which I would personally disagree with as someone who was in the room, as it were, on many of these discussions. Thank you, Ross.
EJ, did you have a?
Hey.
All right. Oh,
Yeah,
Adrian.
Barbara
So
actually answered
sorry, Adrian. DJ, I saw your hand first, so we'll go with you first, and then Adrian will come back to you.
Okay.
Yeah, Barbara actually answered the question that I was going to ask, as far as the what we're actually, I guess, approving. Are we approving the sale, or we're just gonna recommend?
You're not approving the sale or disapproving the sale. What you're going to recommend is approval of the special study report being submitted to DEP as an amendment to the original Act 537 plan that the township had to submit. And the reason the special study is coming up is because of the fact that the system is being sold. So in actuality, you're just recommending the board approve and submit this study to DEP as a supplement to our original plan.
Wait, I'm sorry. So approve that we're to submit this study. That doesn't align with what Fred had said earlier of approving that, in our view, the sale of the system does not impact the Saldo comprehensive plan and zoning, which has nothing to do with the actual study.
So I guess I stand corrected that it should probably be worded to the effect that you recommend that the Act 537 special study does not adversely affect the township's comprehensive master plan, Saldo, or other zoning regulations as it relates to the public sanitary sewer system.
Yeah. Russ, you said it exactly right. It's the purview of what you operate under. That's what the Board of Supervisors wants to know, is that if they sell this system and the ownership changes, the township remains that. Can you still do your job? Does it impact your ability to implement and make recommendations under the Saldo? Because the only thing that really impacts you guys directly is, are public sewers available to service this development? Is it in the public sewer service area? Is it out of the public sewer service area? Can you amend the public sewer service area in the future to address on-lot failing systems? And in this case, because all of the 537 planning remains an action of the township, it does not have in my opinion, does not have an adverse impact. So we want we like the board to understand that and how it doesn't, and therefore consider recommendation of the special study, because you can still make proper recommendations it doesn't impact your ability to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on the planning of any project that comes before this board.
And if I may, the comprehensive plan, page 58, they have the section future needs and recommendations for action. And item 2 on that page is public sewerage. And it states, this comprehensive plan reaffirms the current township policy now in effect of requiring that all major new developments be served by public sewers. And I believe that the Act 537 plan as proposed aligns with that goal of our comprehensive plan.
So can I throw something out there to see if this would meet everybody's requirements?
I think Adrian might have a comment. Sorry.
Yeah, I like from what I'm hearing here, and I just make sure I understand this. From our perspective, this whole thing is set up because of the way the ownership's set up, that the way we're supposed to, and apply what we're doing and the things that we review, we're supposed to treat them the same, with the expectation that it's going to be executed the same way, whether it was LMT doing it in the past as it is now, or the way Aqua does it in the future. And I think to me, it's a pretty easy answer, except the big question I have in my mind is, when we make, part of this is just history, part of this is a comfort level, but when we make a decision right now, the sewer system is owned by our township. When we make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors, the Board of Supervisors also has direct control over the people that would do the maintenance, make the changes, implement what they decided to do with a particular development. And what are the enforcement control mechanisms, whatever, besides a piece of paper? I mean, to get, if Aqua becomes, I'm not saying Aqua's a bad actor, but just hypothetically, if they become a bad actor somehow, what does the town, what controls does the township have to make sure this contract still gets executed the way we expect it to get executed? Because I look at part of the things that we approve here, the developments that we approve, the developments, there's a level of expectation that it's going to be implemented successfully. Right? If we thought something was not operating the way the master plan was operating, we'd have different sets of conversations potentially. And I'm just trying, when we give up the control of who's doing the day-to-day, which I honestly, personally, I've seen that happen 1,000 times. I don't have a personal problem with, but as us to the planning commission and the board of supervisors, I would think you'd want to define what those control mechanisms are, otherwise you end up with a, potentially like a PICO type situation where residents are pulling their hair out because the third-party supplier, under the regulation of the Public Utilities Commission, won't respond to anything.
And the answer to that question is the regulatory control always has been, always will be the PADEP, ultimately the EPA. But reality, it's the PADEP. And that's with multiple things. The operation, the maintenance,
Yep.
They are still required to do a Chapter 94 report every year.
Okay.
As a requirement. They still have to comply with the corrective action plan as a requirement. If there is any concern with how they're doing something, it can be addressed through the 537 plan. But the reality of it is the hammer and the regulatory authority, which it is today, was DEP. They still have to do that. And really how you control, unlike PICO, that doesn't have to report to anyone directly. They have to report every year by March 31st on where they're at. Are there hydraulic overloads?
Okay.
Have they done the maintenance? DEP reviews that report. We're under additional scrutiny in approximately one half of the township, the part that's served by Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority, that we are in compliance with our corrective action plan. Otherwise, they control the number of connections. There also is that we're in control with our requirements and our contract. Is we have certain requirements we flow through Yardley that Yardley controls. We have certain requirements with Marshall Municipal Authority that they still control, and there's certain requirements with Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority that they control. So all of that's done. Basically, the thing that swaps is instead of having a contract operator or a township staff person doing it, we'll now have Aqua Pennsylvania. Aqua Pennsylvania, in addition to all of those, has responsibility and reporting requirements to the PUC. I would argue that 90% of that's financial. But if there is a lack of service, not only can someone complain to DEP, they can complain to the PUC. And a complaint to the PUC is never taken lightly by a third party, only because that implements their ability to buy the next one. That implements their ability to get the next rate increase. So it's all financially driven, on there. But theoretically, there is, not only are we getting with a larger organization that specializes in just operation rather than being a department, no negative comment about it, but we have a department, that's what that company specializes in. Whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, I'm not going to, opine on, but there's there. And now we have the PUC as well as DEP involved to guarantee that the level of service meets all the regulatory requirements.
All right. And so it's like, I guess a simple question would be, let's just, I don't want to pick out any particular development, but a development we've already approved.
Okay.
That's going to get implemented
Next year.
Next year.
Yep.
After Aqua takes over.
Yep.
Is there any ability in the worst case scenario, I'm just dreaming these things up in my head, that the developer and Aqua are figure out something different to do that isn't part of what we approved and the board of supervisors approved and Jim approved in his department as what the plan is?
Well, in this particular case, the answer to that is no. And the reason for that is that you still approve the land development plans.
Okay.
And in this case in particular, the Part 2 permit for the pump station has already been approved by the Board of Supervisors and signed and submitted in. So those standards can't change. So not only do they have to meet those standards, but on any project like that in the future that comes through, you clearly have you review the planning module. And that you can be as specific and you can require your engineer to have them be as specific as you deem appropriate to make sure that there's no question that they're going to install what you want. The more specific you are in that planning. So before you had two cuts of the apple, you had the planning approval, and then you had the water quality management Part 2 review and permit. That's going to be taken away. Now, will Aqua make sure that it complies with township standards? Absolutely. So the township standards still maintain a minimum, and that can be enhanced as you go through there. There will be other projects that I'm working on right now, Dogwood Drive, where we're going to be picking up and doing planning, not only for a low pressure system in that development, but to pick up 9 houses along that road. And then it ends up being an additional total of 14 houses. So that, as Barb said earlier, and Jim said earlier, our desire is, as developments go through, to have the entire township publicly sewered. So that still remains in the planning module, which I'm reviewing on behalf of the township now. I'm also requiring in there that there be improvements to the Chanticleer force main, that the developer be responsible to upgrade that, to provide capacity, not only for their development, but also to sewer the adjoining and adjacent, loose term, anyone else that I can sewer within a reasonable distance in there. So you still maintain that control. And then ultimately that planning module will come before this board for you guys to review and say, that's adequate. And you know what? Not only does it meet the needs of that development, but it goes beyond that. Are there any existing needs areas that can be sewered by that? And you still remain that. So everything that you guys really do, you still have the meats and potatoes of, a Part 2 permit never really came before the Planning Commission. It's not required. And so that was never within your purview. So you don't really lose anything as a Planning Commission. The township does a little bit, but the township compensates for that by doing more detailed planning. So that way the implementation and the means and methods of implementing it, which does become Aqua's responsibility, is very clear.
Where does that planning happen? Where is that going to happen?
That planning happens in the sewage facilities planning. So in the case of Dogwood Drive, it's in their planning module, which hasn't been presented to you yet. I am still working with them and making these requirements and showing that. Where was that also is consistent with your 537 plan, which the last one that we did included that there's going to be a public-private partnership to increase the size of the force main for the Chanticleer to provide 23 additional EDUs. So it's in your base 537 plan. But because it requires a water quality management, DEP makes you go back and do a planning module to basically double reinforce that and add significantly more detail that it's in the overall 537 plan. The overall 537 plan, it's a paragraph and a half. Oh, I reviewed that, read that, and went over that with the applicant's engineer and their preparation and my review of their planning module. So you're still going to have that. And that's why it's going to be equally important for you, more so now going forward, to be reviewing planning modules with how does this impact the area? How does this, what's our goal for this area? And then you make recommendations on it. You obviously can't require anything, but then the Board of Supervisors hears you. And that's where this recommendation that, of that, we're still retaining that control, opportunity to comment, and in that isn't changed by the sale of the system.
Right. And I guess the last thing I would ask is Andy and Jim, like kind of the direction I'm going. It sounds to me like, do you agree with that statement that like this fundamentally doesn't change the way the Planning Commission goes about its business and looks at development projects?
It does not.
You agree, Andy?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Dan, go ahead.
Sorry. Jim, you made an interesting statement about the comprehensive plan, where we are looking to have everyone in the township on public sewer moving forward. Now that this is going to be a private sewer and not a public sewer, subject to private ownership, private rate increases that are, subject to PUC approval, much like PICO, much like others. My personal take is that fundamentally changes everything and makes this a private sewer system where we are beholden to a private entity moving forward in perpetuity and can never get that back. So I would just make it clear in the comprehensive planning process that we are no longer having a public sewer system. It is indeed a private sewer system moving forward for in perpetuity. So it needs to be made very clear that Lower Makefield Township no longer has ownership rights, no say over rates or anything else. Thus, it is owned by a very private entity that is, has a stock ticker and everything else, and is subject only to the PUC, much like other private entities that service Lower Makefield and other parts of the state. That's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, although I think the word private in this case versus public is a little bit different. I think public in this case, in reference to the comprehensive plan, is that it is a system that is used by the general public, similar to how the water lines, they call it the public water supply system, even though it may be privately owned. So it's sort of a nuance in wording there that I think is a distinction.
In a personal opinion, is that's a very important one, because like the public water system, we don't have much in the way of recourse. As folks remember, when we had the infamous turbidity issue, there was really nothing that the township could do, and we just had to sit there and wait for the private entity to do something. And I ended up getting them in front of the Board of Supervisors, but we really had no recourse. So that'll be a similar issue moving forward, just so folks are aware.
It's my understanding it was open for public comments. Were there any public comments that the Planning Commission should be aware of that were made?
Not to my knowledge yet.
Yeah. So from a
No
public
comments have been
hearing
received.
yeah, and we haven't gotten any at the board level that I'm aware of. So, Mr. Ebert, we were talking about, I'm curious about the process here in terms of it almost feel, wanting to get input from the Planning Commission about how this may affect their process. It almost seems like it's an after the fact thought. Normally when we'd go through a process like this and we'd want advisory boards and commissions to chime in on our processes, procedures, and decision making, how we make a decision, we would ask them early in the process rather than after it's already been approved by the PUC, so that we could actually get input on our decision, which hasn't happened. So
Yeah, that's unfortunately how it doesn't happen in Act 537 planning, because basically until the township makes that full commitment and the PUC accepts it, I really can't do a selected alternative. So I think you're talking about two different processes. Where you're talking about maybe a recommendation and input on the sale from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors, which is not what I'm here for, and is not what this purview is. This purview
that's not at all
is-
what I'm talking about. I understand what you're asking. This is how does a sale and the new ownership of the system affect the Planning Commission's ability to do its job under our code and under the State Municipal Planning Code.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that. I would typically prefer that to be earlier, not necessarily the very beginning of the process, because nothing's worked out yet. But I think it's unfortunate that it's happened after everything is all said and done, and puts them in an awkward position to have to do something at the very end of the game.
I can understand where you're coming from. But unfortunately, this is kind of how the procedure works with DEP, is that they wanted to get all the way through so that all the facts are known, so that you can make the most informed decision based on what the Board of Supervisors is doing and how it impacts you. That if you do it early, it could be argued that, well, you didn't know all the facts because you didn't know if the PUC was going to approve it. You didn't know what conditions the PUC would put on. There were be a lot of unknowns if you did it earlier. So it does come at the end of the thing. And it's a double-edged sword. And I understand where your comment is, hey, we're a recommending body and we want to give as much input as we can early in the process. But then by the same token, I think it is appropriate that it comes at this time because now we know everything and there's not unknowns or if-then statements about what the PUC or anybody else could do and how it would impact your ability to implement your zoning and everything. So point taken and acknowledged, but that's just the reason why it's done that way.
You're on mute,
I
Russ.
interrupted you a while ago.
Thank you. Procedural question. It sounds based on when the public hearing is occurring and when the timing of all this, the expectation or the hope would be some action tonight, that there is an approval by the Planning Commission of the required process.
Yep.
Is that correct? That really, from a timing perspective, this needs to occur quickly, or?
Yes, and what I'm also doing, quite honestly, is after the no action alternative, I want to go on the record to explain to DEP that I came back and explained this process very thoroughly to you guys, and that you fully understood it, and that it came back. But yes, my request would be that the board would make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on your position on this as far as your ability to implement the Saldo zoning and planning document that you're charged with making recommendations on.
Yeah, Ross, from a timing perspective, one thing that we forgot to mention, honestly, we have the open public comment period, the public hearing meeting on the 21st coming up. And then ultimately all that is based off of doing backwards math, counting days backwards to make sure that that occurs before. The reason they're doing it on the 21st instead of moving it back a day or two is because they were concerned that Mr. Ebert wouldn't have enough time to make any updates to a report prior to a March 4th closing, if memory serves. So that would only give him, almost 2 weeks rather than, a week and 5 days instead of a week and 4 days. So that's part of the math that's going into scheduling of things and why they're asking it now.
And I
Exactly,
appreciate
Dan.
that, but also we're not commenting on the report itself. We're commenting on the actual sale.
Yep.
And therefore,
And it's important to have that tonight. It's helpful to have that tonight because that way the public can also see that document to say, they understand how it impacts you. And I can also say at the public hearing, this has been reviewed by the Planning Commission twice. These are their statements that were there. I can relay the information from the Bucks County Health Department, Bucks County Planning Commission. So that way everybody knows the full implementation, including so the public can comment so that the board ultimately makes a decision. So I want to give this all to the board in enough time that they can digest that and go in, and then as Dan said, if we're closing on March 4th, I need to submit this report to DEP prior to then. I would like to be able to have time, depending on public comments. I may get none, I may get 200. I want to reply to them all in writing. And I also, want to be able to accurately explain to the board what the comments and the recommendation of this board is.
If I can, I just want to throw out, if we were to recommend any kind of approval, I think we at least ought to have a discussion about having that approval be modified to reflect Dan's comment, which I think is a very good one, that we do think this affects, or at least some of us might think it affects the comprehensive plan to the extent that there would not be public sewer going forward, that it would be private sewer. And I agree with Dan's point. I think it is a distinction with real consequence. There may be some nuance to it, but it's meaningful and it's impactful for forever. So I would think that if we do vote to recommend approval of some portion or all of the plan, that we at least have it reflect something along those lines.
If I may, Mr. Bush, rather than make a distinction of private versus public, because technically the buyer is a public utility that's subject to state regulation as opposed to something like an authority like Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority, which is more of a private entity in this situation, I would suggest that your distinction be made that you're concerned that there may be some effect to the comprehensive plan as the township will no longer maintain control over the sanitary sewer system, because I think it's not appropriate to refer to Aqua's acquisition as being done by a private entity because they are specifically designated a public utility. That's the reason they were able to that's the reason why they had to go through the PUC for review and approval for the sale to occur.
And Tony, if you're interested, their stock ticker WTRG. So they are a private company, much like Exelon owns Pico, which is also a private company, a for-profit, non-profit entity. So they are indeed a private entity. And I deal with public utilities every single day of my life, or public utilities that are all private companies, for-profit companies.
The term we actually use is third-party PUC regulated company rather than private or municipally owned. Public is a tough term for me. To me, public means that there's connection within your public sewer service area. So it doesn't matter who owns and operates it. You still decide whether you're in the public sewer service area or the on-lot. So what I like to use the term here is municipally owned and operated and or third-party PUC owned and operated. Just because private and public is not necessarily the best term, because in the eyes of DEP in the regulatory world, private is something that's owned by an individual that's not governed by the PUC.
Understanding that it's governed by the PUC, but to the general public versus private has it's easier to get their arms around for the general public.
You're probably right. I'm more looking from technical.
Hey guys, we have Fred Weiss on the line. I brought him into the room.
What was that?
Good evening, Fred. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, guys. I really appreciate you reconsidering this issue tonight. You might know I've been the sewer liaison for the last year and some months, and been on the subcommittee, the sewer subcommittee, for a few years. The discussion is very, very interesting. I must add or clarify something. Even though that Aqua is a publicly traded corporation, it is a PUC regulated organization. Plus, it must obey Lower Makefield Township ordinances regarding to the sewers, the sewer laterals, and everything else that Lower Makefield is responsible for. I mean, Fred has made a good statements. Barbara has clarified a few things, but I must interject that even though Aqua is a corporation, it must follow DEP rules. It must follow our local ordinances. It must follow. The township is responsible for inspections, for code enforcement. That will not change, as Fred has stated. The Aqua will be responsible for everything that is currently being done by the township. The ordinance states that all further development must be connected to public sewers, which will not change. There is nothing in this the 537 plan which will will change any kind of future development. And it's the township's responsibility that Aqua follow the 537 plan. And we have, certain tools at our hand that can help enforce that. And of course, Fred, Barbara, or Jim can correct me if I'm wrong. But that being said, if that's all true, then the comprehensive master plan has no effect on the comprehensive master plan. It has no effect on the Saldo. It's the township ordinances which will, and the planning code, the construction codes, all are, not going to be affected by this sale. Sale is not what you're being asked to recommend for or against. Just a matter of, does the 537 transfer change anything in the Saldo or planning, the comprehensive master plan, and does it affect the township's ability to enforce its ordinances or the DEP's enforcement? And I think that's important to consider before you go forward. So I appreciate the opportunity to make my comments, and I'll get out of your hair for now.
And Mr. Weiss, I apologize. I'm back in the chair after a time away, and I forgot to follow proper protocol. So could you just introduce yourself and provide address for the record?
I am Fred Weiss, and I am a Lower Makefield resident, and I'm happy to be making my comments tonight.
Follow
Can
up.
you hear me?
Respond. Now I can. Yes.
Okay. But my picture just locked up for some reason. I'm without much rather than getting a debate. Can I put? I'm going to put an attempted motion out that I think narrows the scope down from what Tony said, and it may be wordsmithed, it may not be agreed by anyone and not seconded, whatever. But I'm just kind of putting it out there. I think it best articulate kind of where I stand on this, I think, right now. And forgive the rough language, but I move to recommend the Act 537 special study move forward based on the fact we see no issues with no impact on Saldo and the master plan, and ultimately from the Planning Commission's ability to perform its mission. And that's it. Did that make sense? I know that was a little not articulate, but.
I will diplomatically say that made sense and as a starting place for
perfect
debate among.
At least that's kind of, at least anyway, that shows where I kind of stand on this. I'm not really that interested in taking the Planning Commission out into commentary on things that are not our purview. And I just now I have at least some clarity on where the Planning Commission, what the Planning Commission's role is in this process, and what the impact may or may not be on what we're supposed to do. And that's kind of personally where I'm interested in commenting on.
Yeah, I'll add to that I understand and appreciate where you're coming from for all three of those prongs with regards to Saldo, zoning, and the comprehensive plan. And I likely agree with you with Saldo and zoning. I'm just not sure I'm there on the comprehensive plan, and that's reflective of my lack of perhaps proper understanding. I'm trying to absorb, especially with regards to the comments around the public-private utility and the points that Tony raised. I'm just not there yet, and I'm sure that, well, where I was going with the question earlier this evening on timing, I can now use that as a sequitur to ask. I'm sure that just approving Saldo and zoning does not get us where the township, or where it needs to be to move this along from a township standpoint, because it needs to be all three. And that's, I'll just make that comment, and it's not a question per se, but happy to hear what TJ and Tony have to say as well.
Okay.
I mean, for me, I can agree with Adrian. It seems like from what has been commented tonight from several parties, that it doesn't seem that it's going to be affecting any of those three. So I'm comfortable, going with Adrian's recommendation for motion.
I would agree with the saldo and zoning, but disagree on the comprehensive plan. And I'm not sure why only 2 out of 3 support on 2 out of 3 would be overly negative, or why we would care that it's overly negative for the township's presentation to the PUC. Our job isn't to make the Board of Supervisors job easier. Our job is to do other things. And if we support them on 2 out of 3 things, or if we support them on 3 out of 3 things, that's really up to us. And how it affects them should not come into the equation, I don't think.
Yeah.
I apologize for this, because just the sound is not great in here. So between Ross and Tony, just help me understand what your concerns are in regards to the master plan and what you think the issues are. I just want to make sure I understand. I'm not like questioning your guys' thought process. I just can't hear that well.
Okay. I mean, I think Dan teed it up, and comprehensive plan talks about public sewer and public sewer going forward. And the point is, this won't be public sewer. It's a privately owned company. And yes, it's publicly regulated by the PUC, but make no mistake, it's a private company that gets to charge whatever the PUC lets it charge. It's not the township. It's not owned by the municipality. It's not owned by another government entity. So it does affect the comprehensive plan.
I guess the first question that pops in my mind with that comment, and I totally understand where you're coming from, but I guess, does the comprehensive master plan have references to public water?
Yes.
Why are you not concerned about that?
Well, wait a minute. The 537 plan, I don't think has. I'm sorry, I wasn't.
I just I understand the point that, like, look, this is a significant change for the township. So this is I totally understand, and like the comprehensive plan calls out for public sewer, and we're changing that from public and from a lot of perspective to a privately controlled entity. But right now we had the same master plan calls for public water.
We're talking about the 537 plan. That's a different. That's
yeah.
Different.
But I apologize, because I might just be misunderstanding what the concern is. What I heard is the concern you had with the letter has to do with our ability to implement the master plan. Am I misunderstanding that?
This is what Dan was talking about, and what we're voting on is the 537 plan, right?
Am I off? No.
No, you're still on it.
You're still on
Oh, my picture went blank.
Can you hear us though?
We can hear you though.
Oh, I can hear you. Okay. All right. I don't know why it went blank, but it's all right. So we're talking about the sewer plan, and the sewer plan talks about being public sewer, and this isn't going to be public sewer.
If I may, looking further in the comprehensive plan, it does mention private sewage disposal systems, And that's related to a private on-lot disposal system,
Mhm.
as opposed to a system that the general public can use. There are no restrictions on people hooking up to the public sewer system. They just need to pay the tapping fee. They are permitted to connect versus a private on-lot septic system. And I think the comprehensive plan's pretty clear that a private system they're referring to as maybe something within a development after you get past the public main, or something that's a private on-lot disposal system. Whereas public sewer, as Adrian had pointed out, it's no different really than public water. It may be privately owned, but it is a public water system. And I know, as Fred Ebert said, DEP has some slightly different wording, but this is the wording in our comprehensive plan.
So, and I guess, so is your concern in the 527 plan, like the comprehensive plan, for instance, the public sewer, but the 527 plan, fundamentally, we're changing it to private sewer and there might be a disconnect in the future? Is that your concern? Tony, don't, I'm not trying to be competitive. I'm honestly just trying to understand.
Well, I think, I'm not sure what you're not getting, and maybe we're talking around each other.
Yeah.
It's when you say public sewer versus that the plan would still have public sewer in it, that means certain things to the public. The public's going to have a certain understanding of what public means versus what private means. And yeah, there's a technical, the real distinction is it's still a publicly regulated entity, but maybe it's just semantics, but it's just not semantics that I'm comfortable with. That's all.
Okay.
Tony, if I can say it another way. So I was on the board and I was the planning commission liaison, and during the time period when the comprehensive master plan was updated. So this was updated finally in 2019. Had I thought that public sewer would have also included selling to a private owner, I would have not voted in favor of passing the plan in its current form. I would have made that distinction very clearly from my own personal way of looking at it. That's how I would not have voted to approve a comprehensive master plan that considered a private source system. I don't think that's provides the greatest public benefit, in my personal opinion. And we did not have that debate either at the planning commission level or the board of supervisors level, because this was not something that was contemplated at that time.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that a little bit, Adrian, just to weigh in on helping you understand where I'm having trouble. It's that this has been a very helpful education lesson this evening in just understanding a little bit more about what we're charged with, what all the moving pieces are, and I can clearly identify it based on the description of what's been provided. It does not appear to me that the sale of the sewer system, I'm going back to Fred's language in his email earlier, it does not appear that the sale of the sewer system will impact our ability to enforce the saldo or the zoning of the township. I'm there, I'm good. And this is for a lack of, it may just require more time to absorb, but I cannot say with certainty that sale is also aligned with the master plan, the comprehensive master plan. I'm not there yet. And that's where my hang up is.
Can I say something, Ross?
Yes.
I guess the way I view it, and I understand what Mr. Grenier's distinction is, the fact that it's not owned by a municipal entity, therefore it's private. But when I look at the comprehensive master plan, I believe the plan designates that the township is looking for a sewer system that is not private on-lot septic type systems, or a system that is not owned by any one individual to control and just blanketly charge whatever they want. I think when you think in terms of a public system, it's a series of sewer pipes and lines that are going to flow to a wastewater treatment plant to dispose of wastewater. So that's how I see the distinction. The fact that there's going to be a sale of the system to a different entity isn't going to eliminate the township's plan to have the entire township under a, if I can't think of a better word, public sewer system, as opposed to going back to everybody having individual on-lots septic systems.
And that's an important point there, Barb, because really what the 537 plan looks like is what's the ultimate long-term means of providing public water and sewer. An individual on-lot system will eventually fail. And if there's not sufficient area for a replacement area, then in the eyes of DEP, the best long-term option is connection to a public sewer system compared to continued use of a private individual on-lot or small flow treatment plant. So that's really what the purpose of the comprehensive plan is to look at what's the long-term best alternative for these people, is not a private individual on-lot system, but rather connection to what we'll term is a public, whether it be third-party PUC or other owned system that goes to a municipally owned and operated treatment plant, and whether that is municipally owned and operated or third-party PUC. I think the purpose of the comprehensive plan is to acknowledge that the best long-term interest of its residents is that when available to connect to a public system rather than to rely upon an individual on-lot system, which all by definition will ultimately fail. I mean, they just will. Whether it's 50 years, 100 years, or 10 years. You know, I think that's why the comprehensive plan was written the way it was.
Just a question. What if we just put in whatever we recommend, don't recommend, comment to the Board of Supervisors, or a caveat in there to say, with a recommendation that we update or at least amend the master plan to ensure that what is referred to as public sewer in the past, the spirit of that does not change with the change in ownership. And I don't know what Barb probably be better with the wording on that, but then just tell the Board of Supervisors, if you're going to do this to avoid confusion, amend the master plan. Don't change the meat of it, but just amend it to reflect the new world that they want to take us into. And that to make sure that our goals and what the master plan's intending to do for us does not change.
That sounds reasonable. If they want to, you have this motion on the floor. I don't know if anybody seconded it yet, but as I understand, Mr. Costello, you're modifying your motion to include a caveat to recommend to the Board of Supervisors an amendment to the comprehensive plan to address the sale of the system
To a private entity.
to a private entity, but not necessarily negating the long-term goal of everyone having access to a sanitary sewer system other than individual on-lot septic
Yes.
systems. I hope somebody wrote that down because I don't think I can repeat that.
Somebody got it. I mean, you guys tell me, does that address kind of what you were concerned about? Or at least kind of, am I throwing the dart at the right dartboard here?
It starts to get there, but the devil's in the details. And I don't think what Barbara said gets us there, or doesn't get me there. It's to incorporate or address the sale of the system to a private entity. What does that mean? How is that worded? I think we have to, if we're going to go down that path, I think it's got to be pretty specific, or more specific than that. Because I'm not sure that that conveys properly what it is we're talking about. Maybe it does. I'm just, as I'm looking at it, I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud.
Well, gentlemen, I don't know at this point if there's any, if any further discussion is probably just going to regurgitate what has already been discussed. So you have a motion on the floor with, I guess, with or without the amendment, Mr. Costello.
With the amendment's fine.
So at this point, if you need, I would call to see if there would be a second and take a vote and then go from there.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Adrian, did you vote for your own?
Yes. Can you see me?
No.
Yes, aye. Yes.
All those opposed?
Yeah.
Motion does not pass.
So why don't you do a call just to be clear, Mr. Brutch, so that we're clear as to who voted nay and who voted yay.
If you were voting yay, please state your name.
Adrian Costello votes yay.
Jim Rigel votes yay.
Mr. Bush, how do you vote?
Nay, no.
And Ross Brock votes nay as well. So, Mr. Pockel, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't know that this clarifies things or muddies the waters, but in the comprehensive plan, there are portions of the township sewer system that are operated, I guess, or maintained by the Morrisville Municipal Sewer Authority and the Bucks County Water and Sewer Authority. And they are both referred to as the public sewer system. So I'll just leave it at that. They're both referred to as the whole comprehensive system is referred to as the public sewer system within the comprehensive plan.
Tony,
Yeah.
go
Sorry,
ahead,
Russ. No,
go ahead, Dan. No,
And I think
you-
part of that at the time, Andy, is because the entire system was owned by public entities, including Morrisville Falls and whoever else. Now and this is a new thing, right? Across the state, Act 112 has totally upended this whole approach to what used to be considered a public use or public good in the utilities and privatizing them for various reasons. So I think a lot of townships have never considered this before as an option. It's just something new. So the comprehensive plan may not have it's not something that personally that I've been part of writing comprehensive plans since the 90s when I was in high school. I was on a planning commission back in high school. And that's something that was never Dr. Weiss, can you go on mute, please? Here, no, it's just you're coughing. I'm not sure if everyone can hear everything. Sorry. And so I don't know that whenever I've been part of a comprehensive master plan process, the private ownership of a sewer system was not something that personally I've never contemplated up until recently, when that became a topic in our own township. And I think by default, almost a lot of us kind of like I don't want to put words in Mr. Ebert's mouth, but I considered it, instead of private on-lot system, I would consider it an integrated sewer system, whether it's owned by a public or private entity. It's sort of the generic term. It's an integrated system that takes advantage of numbers, let's say, in interconnections, and goes to some treatment plant that historically has also been publicly owned. That's also changing now in a lot of places in southeastern PA, especially, where companies like Aqua, companies like PA Water, and others are trying to purchase wastewater treatment plants for large sums of money. I'm not saying that's happening here, but that's something else that is new that I don't know that our plan ever contemplated. So I think the distinctions are going to are very quickly very important, because it fundamentally changes how residents, elected officials, and others have to think about their systems. We're essentially outsourcing. Once this goes private, we've outsourced the entire township's utility system. So there's very little that we have authority over anymore. Good, bad, or otherwise, it's just the way it is. So I think that distinction in the comprehensive master plan is an important one in my opinion. So, but I appreciate. Let me speak.
And if I could just maybe say something too, is that maybe I've taken you down a wormhole with the comprehensive plan. I think it's a great discussion. Is ultimately, really the regulatory things that you guys have are saldo and zoning, and that's really what you guys implement. Comprehensive plan is a guidance to which you guys work and provide recommendations to go through. So maybe we simplify this and just have a motion that it won't impact your ability to implement your regulatory requirements of the zoning and saldo. And you could stop it there, or say that this board would like in the future to revise or look at the impact that this decision that the Board of Supervisors may make will have on its comprehensive plan. And that way you're giving clear guidance that the things that you're required that are regulations, saldo and zoning, that this doesn't impact your ability to implement that, and that things that are a guidance, which is a comprehensive plan, that you'd like to have another look at that. And that way maybe we can get a motion passed tonight that we can proceed and give that information to the Board of Supervisors.
I could be comfortable with what Fred just described.
So if somebody wants to make a motion, they can actually say, make a motion along the lines as presented by Mr. Ebert.
With one request, just clarifying, because Mr. Ebert made the suggestion as to simplifying for the saldo and zoning, and then there was additional language as to the comprehensive plan of revisiting that and acknowledging that. If you do make a motion, would you please clarify whether it's the simple saldo and zoning, or should that commentary about the comprehensive plan and our lack of action on the comprehensive plan be incorporated in that?
Maybe.
I don't know that you need to. Quite honestly, you could keep it that simple if that makes it easier for the board. But if this was a discussion that you guys had and you want to have that thought relayed, I don't know that that's an issue, but I think you could keep it simple and literally just keep it to those two. That's up to the discretion of the board.
I'll make a motion that we limit it to the saldo and zoning regulation, that it doesn't affect our ability to implement saldo and zoning regulations.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Do we have public comment?
No public comment online.
Yeah.
Dan, go ahead.
And Jim, this may be a question for you. The last meeting, one of the comments you made was that the planning commission was to review this for consistency with the comprehensive plan. And when I look at the municipality's planning code, part of the planning commission's role is to review all items for consistency with the comprehensive plan. It's not quite as simple as Mr. Ebert was saying, and I don't mean to sound negative there, Fred, in that when you do, part of the planning commission's purview is to review all of your guidance is, your specific guidance is based off of the saldo zoning code, because those are very prescriptive, setbacks and heights and feet and all that other stuff is very quantitative more so than qualitative. But there is a requirement to review your decisions with looking towards the comprehensive plan as a guidance document. So I just want to make sure that when you're trying to remove the comprehensive plan from the equation, it's still the planning commission's responsibility to consider the comprehensive plan when making decisions to recommend in a certain way.
So maybe the motion would be that the Act 537 special study will not impact the Planning Commission's ability to regulate sale though and zoning, but that the commission cannot reach a consensus as to the impact on the comprehensive plan, which would require future further study.
We'll make a motion to amend the pending motion. To say what Barbara just said.
Do I have a second?
I said that's fine.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Any other questions for me?
No, no, sir. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
If you guys ever want to come back in when we have a planning module or something like that, more than happy to come in and provide the implementation on that.
I'm
But have a
surprised to
good
hear you
night.
say you're happy to see us again, but thank you very much for that offer.
I enjoy seeing you guys. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So we've reached item 3 on the agenda, item 4 on the agenda, the proposed ordinance to amend provisions of Saldo Chapter 178, Article 11, Landscape and Open Land Requirements.
That was a mouthful.
It was a mouthful. So as an opener, this is a amendment to address an issue with non-native plants. Jim, I don't know if you want to comment on, or am I going the wrong direction of opening discussion?
Start out.
Great.
The Board of Supervisors voted to advertise an ordinance for a public hearing on February 16th to consider for enactment an ordinance that will amend the provision of the Township Subdivision and Land Development Ordinance to revise and clarify certain provisions related to the required planting of native trees. I sent out the copy of the ordinance that the Board of Supervisors voted to advertise for adoption. The Bucks County Planning Commission actually did a nice long summary of all the changes that were involved in that. Just to go through on page 1, they noted that several of the trees that were either non-native or had issues with diseases were eliminated from our tree planting list. And in working with the EAC, looking at some other standards for Lancaster County Planning Commission actually had a nice little guideline of native trees for the area, which we're in the same physiographic region. So the trees that do well there would most likely do well here. We came up with the whole list of trees that you see on the Bucks County Planning Commission page 2 and 3, in addition to shrubs, ground cover, and perennials. On page 3, Bucks County Planning Commission noted that we're changing the caliper size. Currently, a minimum 3-inch caliper size is required for street trees, and we're reducing that to be 2 to 2.5-inch caliper trees. We found over the years that most towns use 2.5-inch trees as the standard for what they have planted by developers. By having a tree wait until it grows to 3-inch caliper, here in Lower Makefield, we've had trouble getting some variety of trees. The trees we get are sort of the leftover ones in a lot, or the developers have to order them literally like a year in advance in order to get them planted. So we suggested reducing the caliper size to increase the availability of different species. Also helps with the survivability of trees. We also changed some of the requirements for evergreen, shaded, ornamental trees in buffers, and those changes would reduce slightly the height of the minimum size of trees for evergreens from 6 feet to 5 feet. For shade trees, a minimum of 3-inch caliper down to 2 to 2.5-inch caliper. For ornamental trees, from a 2.5-inch caliper down to a 1.5 to 2-inch caliper. And that's all on page 4 of the Bucks County Planning Commission memo. And along with that, there's some modifications to height of trees so that they comport with each other. Obviously, a smaller tree you don't want to have too big or too small. When we get to page 5, we are proposing to modify the language that other native species not listed in native cultivars may be used with prior approval. Actually, it's non-native cultivars with prior approval of the township's plant expert. I'm sorry.
So,
Let me go
Mr.
to the last
Majeski,
sentence.
can I interrupt for something? A grammatical thing. On page 2 of your ordinance, with this line that starts shrubs may be non-native species. Do you see where I'm at?
Yes.
Yes.
Take out the words to not and put but shall not include invasive. I found it cumbersome to understand, and if you say but shall not include invasive, exotic, or alien species, I think that would be a lot more clear.
Thank you. And if you go to, and actually, that's page 1 of the Bucks County Planning Commission memo. I somehow skipped over that, but you can see highlighted in there that all required plants should be native plants. And then we made the addition that with the exception that not more than 10% of required ornamental flowering trees and shrubs may be non-native species, which shall not include invasive, exotic, or alien species or any species that are on the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources or Pennsylvania National Heritage Program list, subject to the approval of an arborist for the township. And that also, as noted in the Bucks County Planning Commission memo, went for the buffer trees too, that no more than 10% of required ornamental flowering trees and shrubs may be non-native species subject to the approval of the township. The Bucks County Planning Commission did have a couple of comments that they offered. One was that we actually outlined that the certified arborist be certified by the International Society of Arboriculture, the ISA. They also pointed out, as did Mr. Pokel to me through his landscape architects, that there are a few species of trees that we have on there that are subject to, currently subject to blights. The oak trees, there are a number of them have bacterial leaf scorch that is starting to affect this area. And they just want to make sure that those species not be overplanted in any planting plan. And also the flowering dogwood is susceptible to dogwood and anthracnose, and they recommend that be removed from the list, which I think would be a shame. It's a nice tree. And I don't know if there's a treatment out there currently for that or not, but it's something that would be nice to keep in. The EAC also did review the ordinance. They had a number of comments, which they are all incorporated into the ordinance as presented. The one comment that was not incorporated in the ordinance was they objected to the use of the non-native species as I outline in page 2 of our ordinance or on page 1 of the Bucks County Planning Commission review memo. And they were pretty adamant about that and made their case at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And the board chose to still go with a 10% non-native species for flowering trees and shrubs only.
Thank you, Jim. Comments from the commission or from other participants?
Curious.
Let me just say something. Oh, go ahead, Don.
Tony, you first.
Very quick. I happen to see that very recently Pennsylvania took a list of non-native plants or non-native trees and banned them as invasive and destructive, one of which there's a lot of in Lower Makefield, including it's referenced in the EAC report, are the Bradford pears. In late December, Pennsylvania banned them as invasive and destructive. So I'm curious, when you had the conversation at the Board of Supervisors level about inclusion or not of 10% non-native plants, what were some of the comments that were raised, and what was the board's thinking at that time?
Sure, I can speak to that. So the board, it was a 3-2 vote, right, as in this issue. The comments, well, you mentioned that in December, the Bradford Pear, that there was another group from the U.S. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture today that were more recently banned. The quote is rather telling, actually. It says, Pennsylvania is working to repair the damage done by plants that were introduced to our landscape decades ago without foresight into how they might harm our environment and food supply. Banning the sale of invasive plants and educating homeowners and consumers to plant native species today are both vital for protecting our environment, our food supply, and our economy tomorrow. That's the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. That's his statement in the newspaper today. So those comments in favor of, and these were the quotes that they picked up in the newspaper, in favor of allowing for 10%. Where, you know, there's some non-natives growing in the township now, so why would we, what effect would limiting 10% in a new development have on stuff that's growing here already? The main comment was wanting more attractive flowering plants. I believe that was said in reference to allowing for prettier prom pictures, quote unquote. That's the one that's in the newspaper. And then ultimately, a big part of the request for allowing for non-natives are coming from developers that have put in recommendations to the township to add additional species to our planting list. You know, one developer who is coming before you all have seen in the past, his landscape architect submitted a very detailed plan set to the township with recommendations with the landscape architect's name on it. Many of those were non-native, some of them were poisonous, etc. So basically, you know, I'm trying not to be overly cynical here, but the push was to allow for some more options for I won't even demean, I'll say it nicely, for more aesthetically pleasing plants to certain people. And to give developers more options for what they can plant. That's what carried the day. Myself, full disclosure, I am in the business of, as an environmental scientist, I design and purchase thousands upon thousands of native plants a year for habitat mitigation projects and other things. So first and foremost, the recommendations to allow for a reduction in the size of material, 5 of the 6 chain, whatever they were, that's actually spot on. Folks always think put in bigger trees because they look nicer, they'll get bigger faster. In practice, that isn't actually how it always works. Oftentimes, if you plant a smaller tree, it more easily can adapt to a new environment and develop a root system strongly. It may take a year or two to actually grow well above ground, but below ground it's growing very nicely, so that then it actually becomes a healthier tree in the long term. So those changes to reduce caliper sizes and slightly reduced heights actually are a good thing in terms of promoting tree health over the long term for the township. So that's why the EAC agreed. I can say that in my profession, as a professional, not as a supervisor or anything else, I agree wholeheartedly with that. All studies point to that being a correct statement. And I would wholeheartedly endorse those changes. On the other side of the fence, in terms of the native species specifically, the arguments against are, one, this is the first time it's ever been challenged. No one's ever had in the, I don't know, however many years it's been now. I think this all started maybe with Senator Sanashiro when he was a supervisor, was when this ordinance started. I can't recall of a time when native plant ordinance was strongly challenged by anyone. This is something that's new. Keeping it high level, invasive plants, non-native plants being planted. Like you mentioned, the Bradford pear. There are many other examples of aesthetically pleasing, or to some folks, that they planted. Either developers planted in the hundreds or thousands, other folks planted it in their yards and thought they looked nice. You know, purple loosestrife is a beautiful purple flower, but it's one of the most invasive plants we'll see on the East Coast. And it was put here because it was pretty, and people are looking at it, but they didn't know any better. It's just the way it happened. You'll see there's different types of ornamental grasses that have been planted that do the same thing. They look nice. People like how they look, but they just take over and they run. Bamboo is an infamous one in the township, right? People like the aesthetics of bamboo, but it just takes over and destroys things and ruins habitat. So the reasons for not allowing for non-native plants is that they take over habitat. They just, they're bad for the environment from a habitat perspective. There are many studies that show that native suburban yards have up to 10 to 20 times more native bugs and pollinator species in the yards versus a non-native planted yard with a similar density of plants and species. So it's incredibly important to promote native species for our, we've all heard about the declining pollinator habitat around the East Coast and the country, and it's largely due to largely due to non-native species, invasive species limiting the usable habitat for bugs, and as I like to say in our business, we always say bugs and bunnies, for those different species, where it may not look all that different to most folks, but when scientists actually do the studies, you see a greatly altered habitat. So, and that has a habitat impact to our environment, has a quality of life impact, and it impacts our economy in that when you reduce the types and numbers of pollinators that are available, you reduce the productivity of agriculture. Whether we understand that or not, as lay people, is one thing, but scientists are pretty locked in on invasive species being a big no-go and promoting native plants. I'll say, rather ironically, at our last Board of Supervisors meeting, we presented the EAC's annual award to an individual who started a composting company, who was promoting sustainability, and because she was a private company, she passed the award. She was able to provide the monetary award that goes along with that environmental award to Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve. And Bowman's Hill is their main charter is to promote native species. So we're giving an award to a native plant society at the same time we're allowing for non-native plants. So it was a many members of the EAC showed up, spoke against allowing native plants, non-native plants, I'm sorry, in there. But we're, like I said before, we're very much in agreement with the, let's say, flexibility to allow for planting of smaller plants, because they have similar experience where they have been successful. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to answer any questions from a technical perspective as well.
Jim?
Okay.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I do have one more thing to add. There was one more addition or change to the ordinance. That was the type 3 buffer, which is the farmland buffer. Previously, it was a 25-foot buffer all on the farmland side of the property that included trees. This has become problematic for the farmland preservation group over the years in that they have the maintenance for the trees and it gets to be costly. So to relieve them of that burden going forward, should we have the opportunity to have more farmland preservation subdivisions, we maintain the 25-foot buffer on the farmland side, which is typically what they give anyway, and that would be planted in grasses and wildflowers or with ground cover plants where the slope's a little bit steeper. And then on the residential property side of the line, that there'd be a 10-foot area planted with appropriate native species to provide a naturalized farmland buffer. So that's the other change that we had in the ordinance.
Andy?
Sorry, and just to add to what Jim said, so it's clear, Jim, it seemed to me that we were in unanimous agreement that that was a good thing, that change.
I assume so, but thank you for
I just
clarifying.
want to make sure. I like
Yeah.
when Jim makes it, I like to back him up whenever I can.
Yeah. Adrian, we'll get to you in a second.
Adrian.
I can't see it, Adrian, so.
I don't know why I'm not on.
Get away.
I should go, no, I'm not even on. Can you guys even see me? No.
He could go sit at that little table. That camera's still on
Yeah,
where
you
Freddie
know,
Ebert was.
Actually, I'll just go sit next to Jim. No, but look, I'm not gonna sit here and rehash the decision of the Board of Supervisors, but I mean, I think, oh, I thought I did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Better.
But what they voted for it, but that does raise, I think it does raise, at least as I'm reading through this, raise some questions that I think are pertinent to us. And, maybe as I look at the language of some of this stuff, should we just at least go back with recommendations of things that should be strengthened or clarified? And like one thing, the first thing I look at is, unless I misread it, I see, okay, we need, the approval or whatever of a botanist or an arborist, but do we say who that arborist has to work for? Like, I mean, can a developer show up with a certified arborist and say, this person says it's okay? And the township, to save a couple bucks, says, oh yeah, we'll just take your guy's word for it. Or should it say independent arborist hired by the township?
It actually says an arborist for the township.
I know,
So
but
that
I
would be
just want to
someone
make,
that we would select.
I just, for me, if I can misinterpret that, you can be certain that developers and developer lawyers can try and misinterpret that as well. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that it has to be someone completely independent of the project being presented.
Adrian, if I can ask a leading question, are you saying that if that part is addressed and clarified, you're okay with the non-native aspect of this revision?
No, I'm not necessarily okay, but look, here's some, like I have 3 things written down right here, just as I'm thinking about this, that might help me get my head around it.
Okay.
Right? Like,
Okay.
and so like Dan brought up the pollinators before. And I know pollinators are a big deal. I'm not even close to being the level of expertise a lot of people are, but I do enough planting and stuff, and we try and be sensitive and aware enough when we plant to make sure we're planting good pollinators and not just, useless flowers, just that look good to the human eye and nothing else. And, if somebody's proposing a non-native flowering plant, can we put a requirement on that at least it's proven to be an effective pollinator? Yeah, I'm trying to say, like, you try and split the difference, right? The Board of Supervisors, I'm not trying to tell the Board of Supervisors what they should and shouldn't do. But they've asked me to help out on this planning commission to kind of look at it from a different perspective. And I'm saying, okay, if you want to do these things, here are some areas of concern that maybe you could shore up so we don't get ourselves into any problems. And we end up in this sort of little tight negotiating range that still adheres to most of the spirit of the intent of this thing, rather than giving an open blank piece of paper to a developer and give it to their, landscape designer and say, put in whatever the heck you want up to 10%.
I realize you have additional points. Can we pause on that 1 second? And Andy, did you have a comment? I was curious to hear what you had to say.
Well, it was just a minor clarification that the Board of Supervisors, the draft ordinance as presented to the board had 20% up to 20% of non-native species. And I believe that the Board of Supervisors changed that language down to 10%.
Yeah.
So just picking up on what you just said, Andy, in the past, I had been on the Planning Commission in a prior tenure, and these types of ordinances, including this one, I think I was on the Planning Commission when this first came up before us, and we recommended approval of it to the Board of Supervisors. It flowed from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors, who then voted to advertise it. Here we're getting it backwards. it's already a done deal. They're asking for us to recommend approval or disapproval or comment on it in some other way after they've already voted to advertise it, if I understand correctly, which makes no sense. This is like the third or fourth thing that we've had like this recently, where the supervisors are doing it completely backwards. And I don't mean to, I'm not attacking you personally, Dan. I'm just saying as a collective body, it's not the way it's supposed to work. It's working backwards here. So any input that we have is after the fact and unlikely to change the fact that they've already voted to advertise this. So I'm not even sure why this is even on our agenda tonight.
If I may, procedurally, when a ordinance that amends saldo or zoning, it has to be submitted to the Bucks County Planning Commission and local planning commission at least 30 days before the public hearing, which is what they did, unless it's an ordinance generated by the planning commission. So
I understand that, but in the past, these came to the planning commission prior to going to the supervisors.
Yeah.
And this is backwards.
Yeah, and Tony,
I guess I still look at this as I agree with what you're saying, Tony, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. But I think we should be as honest as we can in our feedback to the board of supervisors.
I don't disagree with that. I'm talking about for future ordinances that come up. It shouldn't work this way.
Yeah. So Tony, just a little clarification, because I was on the EAC prior, and as a member of the EAC, we used to propose new ordinances or ordinance updates related to these items, right? And to your point, that's usually they would start with the EAC, or maybe the board might have a thought about an ordinance and say, hey, why don't you guys look at that? And then we develop something or edit something or whatever. The EAC would push it forward. Often procedurally, it would also go before this group or, earlier versions of this group. And then you would combine whatever, and it might go back to the EAC after this group. And, there would be some back and forth. And then ultimately would make its way up to the Board of Supervisors. There might be a discussion, or, it would go back and forth, up and down the chain, as it were, right?
Right.
Like you're speaking about. And that's how things are supposed to work. This came from an outside developer to township administration that immediately started changing the ordinance per the outside request, and then it went to the supervisors. The supervisors in this case said that we were going to wait for we said in the meeting that we we're going to wait for the EAC to provide comment. We didn't do that. The EAC's meeting was actually the day after our meeting, where we voted, the board voted to advertise. So, you're absolutely right. Procedurally, this is backward. I won't say what I had in my head, but it's backwards. And so I think I'll say this. I don't like to think of anything like this as a done deal, because I don't want you all to seem like you're being disrespected or ignored by any means. I think your voices are very important. The EAC has, even though the process that they were told was going to occur did not occur, they still showed up in numbers to the public meeting, Board of Supervisors meeting, and expressed everything that you read in that letter, and more forcefully than I could ever do it tonight, or even at the Board of Supervisors meeting. But because they felt it very important that they had their voices on the record. So, please don't be shy. And I know you're not, but I want you to know that at least I can only speak for myself, but this commission, you're set up to be an advisory board for a reason. Planning commissions are among the most respected boards in the state per our municipal planning code. And it is very important that we have your thoughts, opinions, and guidance on the record. It is an advisory board, but and maybe certain boards do what they want versus listening to advisory boards. That's just personalities of people, and that changes over time, hopefully, so that we actually do keep an open mind and listen to the planning commission. I can't say that enough. It pains me to hear you say what you said, Tony, because I come to these meetings and genuinely want to listen to what everyone is saying so I can take it back to the board. Whether the board listens to us and, listens
That's
to
a
this
different-
group.
That's a different
It's
issue.
different.
but-
It is. But I just want, I think, but it does fall in line with whether or not you're observing procedure, typical procedure, whether it's established by regulation or established by precedents over time. The one last thing I'll say is we did have a nice lengthy conversation about comprehensive plan earlier today on the previous topic. Native plants are, the native plant ordinance from 2007 is listed in our comprehensive plan as a major accomplishment, quote unquote. And is the native plants are mentioned multiple times in the woodland section, other sections of the comprehensive plan as providing a great benefit to the township. So I just want to make sure that you all are aware of that since we have been talking about the comprehensive plan.
Thank you,
I
Dan.
think you know where I stand, but it's pretty clear. But
I get
I
the
just want to
general
make sure you're
gist
aware.
of it, yeah.
Yeah.
So to move this along, why don't we separate this into two different conversations? One being everything non-native that is involved in an ordinance and the non-native species aspect of this, and discuss that, and then come back to the native plant ordinance and see if that is a efficient way to discuss. So putting us, Adrian, and absolute full respect to everything you wanted to say about the non-native language, I think that we can quickly address some of the other sections first.
I just said one other thing. Like, I would like to tell the supervisors, I'd be more comfortable with this if they require developer to list plant by plant their rationale for why they can't use a native substitute.
Okay.
Well, that shouldn't be that hard. If somebody's selecting a plant over another plant, it shouldn't be hard for only 10% to go and write a couple of sentences on why it's necessary for them to not use a native plant.
Fair. So let's come back to the native plants with regards to the tree size, the farmland buffers. Forgive me for what else I'm neglecting, but any issues, comments, questions, debate around those provisions? Tony, you good too?
Nope.
Okay, so I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Planning Commission, but I think if we reach a motion, that part should be fairly straightforward. With regard, I'll give my 2 cents first on the native plant issue, which is, Adrian, I respect what you're saying of trying to craft that. I don't love the idea of even modifying pieces of it because it sends the wrong message. To me, it sends the wrong message, which is, if you're gonna, we don't like this. Well, I personally don't like this. I don't like the. But if you're gonna do it, why don't we suggest that? I want to send a stronger message of no, non-native species are not intended to be in this township. In accordance with everything we've heard from the EAC, from the Bucks County Planning Commission, from the state itself, I cannot get behind such a suggested change.
I guess, and I've talked to Dan about this in the past too. It's like I fancy myself, I guess, I try and be anyway. I don't know if I'm successful at it. A bit of a pragmatist, where I think smart, like right-minded people get in a room and they could probably find a few plants after a good discussion that make more sense, and there's a good rationale for them, and there's a good decision-making process about it. I mean, again, we're drawing a line there. My issues and like the 3 points that I brought up, and I wasn't intending to make a motion out of those. I was just sort of trying to articulate my thinking on some of these things. Is I don't think there's enough controls around this. I think it's too ripe for it to be taken advantage of. And, maybe in the best world, in an ideal sense, when this was articulated, maybe the intent was all these controls are going to be there, but when someone else is here 5 years from now, they don't know what those intents are. And so I think it's too, it's just too wishy-washy. If we're going to let somebody cross over into some realm that we've in the past claimed we don't want people to go, we ought to have some pretty good controls around that, like review mechanisms and documentation and specific parameters of what we are allowed that's more scientific than just, the flowers look nice.
Yeah,
And so I guess I'm with you, like at the way it's written right now, I have a hard time getting behind just because I don't see the control mechanisms.
I'll give a better example or another, not a better, another example of the ambiguity in it of a 10%. So with the exception that not more than 10% of required ornamental flowering trees and shrubs may be non-native species. So are you telling me that I can plant one non-native tree that's going to grow 35 feet tall and put 9 native shrubs around it that are 1 feet tall each, and I've met the requirement? That to me is 10% of what I've just planted. And yet the 35-foot tree is going to do far more damage to our environment from a non-native species standpoint than I'm saving with the 9 bushes. So
100%, doesn't it? Is it area, 10% area, 10% number of stems, yes. Root balls?
So
what?
There's a number of ambiguities to me in this language that I cannot support, in addition to the concept in general. So Adrian and I have dominated the floor.
Right, yeah.
Tony and TJ, any additional commentary?
Russ, I'm with you too. I don't even understand, even at 10%, why even include it? It just, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's either you have it or you don't have it. So I'm 100% with what I've heard, and I guess what's all of the information that we've gotten, that I'm okay with the other stuff, but with the trees and the brushes, but with the non-invasive or with the invasive, and I can't get on board with that either.
I'm with you guys on that. The other the changes, I'm okay with all of them except the non-native exception. I'm not okay with that.
Is there a motion on the floor for this ordinance?
I'll make a motion that we recommend, I'll call it the right thing, that we recommend approval of the proposed ordinance to amend provisions of Saldo Chapter 178, Article 11, Landscape and Open Land Requirements, with the exception of the provisions concerning the non-native plant species.
Can I clean that up, that
Sure.
you recommend approval of the proposed amendment to Saldo regarding required planting of trees, subject to the elimination of the planting of non-native species? You want to get rid of that provision, correct?
Yes, correct. That's correct.
So I would say recommend approval subject to the
Okay.
removal
fine.
or elimination of the provision for planting non-native species.
Can I get a second?
Second that.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Other business.
I'll be quick. 2 seconds. Picking up on what we just talked about, just that if Dan could relay to the Board of Supervisors that on future recommended, if there are proposed ordinances, that the Planning Commission would appreciate having its input taken before the Board of Supervisors votes to advertise a new ordinance, as has typically been the case in the past.
Barbara, can I ask you a question? Sorry, I know you're writing. I don't want to interrupt
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. You've been very helpful on this tonight. You should be a lawyer, I must say. Now, would it be appropriate, because this is something I'm hearing a lot of from others, and I'm not. It's not always as effective if it comes directly from my mouth. Sometimes it's more effective if it comes via a motion of some type by a advisory board, that they ask, in this case, ask, as Mr. Bush very eloquently stated, asking for some heads up, let's say, earlier phase review of potential ordinances. Would it make would it be appropriate for that to be in a motion format so that they could then have a clear recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that could be read? It has a little more weight when it's a motion with a vote versus just a request
I don't know.
that comes through me as a liaison.
I don't know if that emotion would make any difference, quite frankly. But I guess I need to wrap my head around exactly what the request is. Are you asking that the Planning Commission be afforded the opportunity to preview proposed ordinances before it goes to the Board of Supervisors for advertisement?
Well, yeah, but it's not preview. Right now, this was before us looking for a recommendation, whether we would approve this ordinance, recommend approval of this ordinance or not. But it was already a fait accompli because the Board of Supervisors had voted to advertise it. And in the past, when ordinances came up, they were typically, at least in my prior tenure as on the Planning Commission, I was on it for 8 years before this current tenure, and we had many ordinances come before us. And including this one, when it first passed in 2007, came before the Planning Commission. As Dan said, it was it was initiated by the EAC. They came to us with what was a rough outline of an ordinance. We provided input. They went back, worked on it a little bit further, came back to the Planning Commission. We recommended approval. It then went to the Board of Supervisors. Jim was the township engineer, was not the township engineer, or excuse me, was a township engineer at that time, I think. Am I right about that, Jim? Not there. So that's typically how it worked before. This seems like if you're looking for our recommendations, you would do, which is, I guess, required by Pennsylvania statute, it would seem that the Board of Supervisors would want that before they voted to advertise the ordinance to the public.
Yeah, okay. I was just, because I wasn't sure how this all got implemented as to this ordinance. That's why I was asking.
Yes.
Adrian.
I don't know if you guys can see me yet or not. Okay.
Yep.
And anyway, I think in my mind on this, at this point, since this is really the first time it's come up, we may have thought it before, but we haven't really discussed this before. I think it's probably appropriate for Dan to even bring it up at the next, the end of the meeting when you go through your boards and committees, and just say, hey, there was a level of frustration with this one, with the Planning Commission, because we felt like we were kind of being, however you want to word it. I think we're saying we feel like we're being a little bit used like a rubber stamp on something we should have had more input into. And this is my words. You guys can change that. And I don't think it's even that old, because I just think when I first started on this board, we were going through the ordinance change before, the mixed use overlay. And, that we were very much involved in the beginning before the Board of Supervisors decided on the language or not. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort to kind of put that together. We had big public meetings, and then it went to the Board of Supervisors, and everyone was kind of in lockstep on what that would be. Yeah. And this is kind of like flipped around on the other, at least for this one, we feel like we're flipped around on the other end where everything was put together, and then you're coming to us asking for help. And this is something that's going to come in front of us a lot.
Yeah. So Adrian, to your point, a lot of that falls on, and I'm not picking on anyone, and I'm not trying to make myself look good. I'll say that ahead of time. A lot of that falls on the chair of the board, because they set the board agenda and look, and they can look at process and procedure. So in 2019, when the mixed use overlay came up, that's when I was the chair at the time, and I was, to your point, not trying to pat myself on the back, more being careful more than anything. Set up the process such that would occur. For many reasons, I wanted that to occur, and I thought it was very important for that to occur the way it did, because that's the process, right? To get to.
And I think that's what I'm trying to get to is, look, this is the first time it's happened. We have a new chair of the board. The board, everyone's in new roles and things like that. I'm not trying to send like some official, message that we're upset, but I mean, you just go back and say, hey, look, honestly, personally, I'm not speaking for any other planning commission, but I feel like I could have, if I had the chance when this was being worded, I could have gotten behind this, had I've been able to address and articulate some of my concerns before I got put on paper and advertised.
Yeah, I hear you. And this one has spanned a couple chairs, this particular item. And I think there's certain motivations to get it done quickly, and it just, it doesn't always work well when you try to do that. So I will try in my nicest way possible to articulate what Mr. Bush has stated, and I think what everyone else seems to be behind. At the same time, if you know any of the members of the Board of Supervisors, it may, behoove you to give them some friendly, unsolicited advice on a few things.
Well, I'll submit a memo as well to the township manager indicating that the planning commission raised this issue and would like it to, would like to
appreciate that, Barb. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because honestly, and you all have been watching meetings for a while now, if I, and I'll bring it up at my supervisor meeting in a nice way, but sometimes, depending on whose mouth it comes out of, it'll dictate how well it's heard by the board. Unfortunately, so, and that, that's just the way it is with this particular board at this time. But I will definitely pass along your concerns, and if you don't mind, I'll say that you want to work with the board in a positive light to maximize the benefit of our future ordinances.
What's the point of an advisory board if we aren't there to advise on anything?
Yeah, exactly.
Point taken. Not sure I'll say it quite that way, Ross, but but point very well taken.
Fair enough. Okay. I do want to apologize if there was any public comment with regards to the proposed ordinance for Chapter 178. I failed to ask, and I do apologize to anybody in the public who was looking to comment. But with that in mind, if we have no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second, first,
Vote.
whatever.
All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Great discussion
Thanks,
tonight,
guys.
folks.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.